Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome.
Welcome everyone to our weekly assembly on this, the first Sunday of 2021. Whether this is your first visit or you've been with us for decades, we are glad you are here as part of our gathered community. And as part of keeping that community connected, we invite everyone to use the chat during assembly and to stop by our Zoom coffee hour immediately after assembly. Visitors are especially encouraged to say hello in the chat so we can say hello back. The link to coffee hour will be available in the chat, and it can also be found in your most recent emails from FUS. Please stop by this social time for as little or as long as you like, and enjoy our new feature that allows you to move among breakout rooms on your own. Our monthly theme for January is imagination, and as we peer into this new year with trepidation and hope, here are some words from Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Teresa Soto, from her book, Spilling the Light. Memorize the compass points of the day yet to come, the truth, the love, the fire, the endless yes of the horizon. Shake the scales from your imagination. Reach, stretch, rise. There is no more time for pretending that everything can be without your care, without your attention. You can mourn, grief being more real at times than the promise of sunrise. And yet, while we mourn changes, losses, deceptions, and betrayals, beneath the ash we find the ember. We weep, and then, as we have learned from labor movements, we organize. Remember the day toward which we gather, the tomorrow toward which we advance. Come, let us gather in community. Each week when we gather, we light our chalice and share one of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, or one of the aspirations of our congregation. This week, we light the chalice remembering our aspiration to pursue wisdom through reason, science, art, and the stories of human civilizations.
Now for our congregational covenant. Love is the spirit of this place, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. After more than a century practicing congregational humanism and bridging the gap between the religious and secular worlds, First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is still unique in our pursuit of a community that values and promotes the open-eyed and evidence-based free exchange of often dangerous ideas. Join us as we continue the search for truth, meaning, and justice, and help keep the voice of Unitarian Universalist humanism loud and strong by considering a gift. You can find us on PayPal, the Give Plus app, or firstunitarian.org/donate. Thank you.
Hi, folks. Bob Adderhold here. I'm the current president of the FUS Foundation, and I'm here to introduce you to one of this year's Pearson Grant recipients and to talk about the Kurt Pearson Social Justice Fund. The Pearson Fund is one of 9 funds that the Foundation Board manages. Mibbs and Perry Pearson created the Pearson Fund in memory of their son Kurt, who died of AIDS at age 29. Its purpose is to provide support to nonprofit organizations doing the social justice work in our community that Kurt cared so deeply about. The Pearson Fund makes annual distributions. Since its inception 30 years ago, it's grown to $93,000 and has distributed almost $50,000. Annually, FUS members nominate nonprofit organizations which then apply for a grant. A vetting team chooses from among the applicants. This year, we distributed $4,200 among 5 of the 10 applicants. I'm happy to have with me Noella Fath Cutter, a representative of Project Power, which is the recipient of a $600 grant. Noella, please tell us a little bit about your work, Project Power, and how the grant money will be used.
Sure. The Project Power program is a community education program through Anoka Hennepin. We're part of the school district and also part of community education. And we provide recreation and leisure activities for adults with special needs. We have individuals in our program who are anywhere from age 16 all the way up to 70 plus, with a variety of different special needs. We have individuals who have Down syndrome, folks who are on the autism spectrum, individuals who may have traumatic brain injury or physical disability. So we really try to cater to everybody who's able to be a part of our program. We also have some individuals who are part of the deaf and hard of hearing community that take our activities. And this year has been especially challenging for them, partly because most of them are stuck at home. Either they live in some residential settings where maybe they have 3 or 4 roommates, or they might be at home with adult parents or maybe in foster care. And so it's been difficult for them to get out into their regular activities. So we have been providing a variety of different art activities for them, and we want to be able to continue those activities and also expand. And we found really good success with them being able to get some art supplies, have those as a kit that they're able to do at home, and then also connect through Google Meet or Zoom and be able to see their friends, because that's the other thing that they've been missing, and they don't always understand why all of a sudden I can't see my friends. And a number of them also have quite limited amount of funds that they're able to spend on different activities. Many have lost jobs as part of this as well. And so they just don't have the ability to take all of the classes and activities that they want to. So we're going to be providing some different art activities for them, everything from some sculpting clay, painting on canvas, mixed media, beads, and this will help us cover our costs for both those supplies and our staff for those activities.
Okay, great. Where does the funding for your project typically come from?
We get a little bit of funding from the state, and then we do apply for some different grants, and then also the participants pay a fee for their classes too. So we try to keep those fees as low as we can, but they also pay a percentage of the classes that they take too.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Noella.
Thank you so much for the funding for us to be able to continue to do this for these specific activities.
On Sundays when we gather, we take a few minutes to reflect on the joys, sorrows, and milestones of the human experience. We do this so that we stay in touch with our own humanity. We do this to remind ourselves of the value of a moment of stillness. And we do this so that no one among us is alone, either in celebrating joy or in facing the burdens of life. This morning we have a sorrow from FUS member Barb Weatherhead. Barb's partner of 4 decades, Mike Karn, died from complications of COVID-19 this past Thursday, in the company of Barb and their daughter Mariah. Mike was 21 years old. He was a talented artist and musician who loved children, the Beatles, and singing and playing his guitar. He will be missed by his large family and many friends who hope to gather when it is safe to do so, for a celebration of life and a scattering of ashes from his green cremation. Members of FUS who have a copy of the directory can send cards to Barb at her home. Cards also may be sent to the FUS office. We pledge our companionship and support to Barb at this time of grief and remembrance. And we have an update this morning from the daughters of FUS member Barbara Blackstone. As many of you know, Barbara had suffered a traumatic brain injury in a fall about a year ago, and had a second fall and injury this past autumn. Barbara has experienced numerous health complications, including a decline in physical health, appetite, ability to speak, and mental acuity over the past few weeks. With little indication that she would be able to return to the kind of life she treasured, a life full of independence and conversation and incisive thoughts, Barbara will be transitioning later today to hospice care. The focus will be on keeping her comfortable and keeping her connected to people she loves. This is, of course, a difficult step, but it's consistent with Barbara's wishes. And we send our thoughts and support to Barbara, Lisa, and Laura in these tender and precious days. The link to Barbara's Caring Bridge page will be shared in the chat, making it easier to keep updated and share your supportive thoughts. We now pause to reflect on all the challenges and heartbreak going on in our lives and in the broader world, particularly after another difficult week in Minneapolis. And we think with gratitude of all those who are leading lives of justice, service, and compassion. Let us now share a moment of silence.
This piece is the main title from the film Unfaithful, which deals with the corruption of being manipulated and the negative, dark side of imagination.
We awakened this past Christmas morning to a disturbing news flash. There had been an explosion in downtown Nashville, Tennessee. As the day went on, the story became more bizarre. The bomb was in an old RV. A recording was playing, warning people about the bomb and counting down. In between announcements, the recording played a Petula Clark hit from the 1960s downtown. The detonation occurred when the fewest possible people would be in the area to minimize casualties. At the moment, investigators are not certain about the motives of the bomber. What we do know is that the bomb damaged an AT&T facility, perhaps because the bomber's father was employed by a precursor to AT&T. That's one possibility. And another is that the bomber was obsessed with conspiracy theories, one being the danger of 5G networks. Fear of cellular technology and Wi-Fi has been around for as long as those technologies have been around. Who can forget those prophecies of cooked cancerous brains when cell phones first came out? And as a new technology, the 5G is the latest suspect. In addition to that, the spread of 5G networks and the spread of the coronavirus were bound to get linked in the minds of conspiracy theorists because they were happening at about the same time. Something on the order of 50 cell towers in the United Kingdom were destroyed just in the month of April this past year as the initial spread of the virus in the UK occurred. And this current outbreak, if you will, if you enjoy puns, of the conspiracy theory appears to have begun in France in the right-wing blog titled Les Moutons Enragés, the enraged sheep, or maybe the rabid or mad sheep. The fact that Facebook began cracking down on sites propagating the theory only made conspiracy theorists more enraged. And so the logic of this particular conspiracy fantasy appears to be that 5G technology causes radiation, which spreads COVID-19. Perhaps, goes the speculation, the pandemic is all about those towers that are going up all over the world, because weren't they building 5G towers in Wuhan when all this started? Another conspiracy theory that the bomber may have bought into was about shape-shifting reptilian aliens who, as the theory goes, are disguised as world leaders, such as the Obamas, and celebrities like Justin Bieber. And then there's the satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals that QAnon devotees fear. And I'm sure this list goes on and on. To repeat, investigators don't know at this point if the Nashville bomber bought into these conspiracy theories, but a lot of people do, somewhere up to 25% by some estimates. And that's my question for the day. Why do people believe fantasies like these? And I guess there are multiple reasons. The reason I want to focus on today is the function of images and symbols in the mental life of human beings. Because our theme for this new January is imagination. And today I want to think about the images and the imagination and how those images can lead us to clarity and to delusion. Because the first step in getting beyond manipulation, I think, is to understand what images in general mean to the thought of we human beings. And the second step is about interrogating those images concerning who and what put them there, why and how, and can we accept them or should they be ignored? Perhaps the most amazing thing about human consciousness is that even though every one of us has it, as has every Homo sapiens who has ever lived for the past 50,000 years or so, we still have no idea what consciousness is. Different disciplines define consciousness in different ways, but none of them have cracked the code convincingly. Do we think in words? Do we think in images? Do we think in a combination of these, sometimes in one, sometimes the other, sometimes both? Or are we perhaps fooled into thinking that we think in words or images when actually we don't think in either one of those? We don't know. And if there's anything that's hiding in broad daylight, it is the mystery of consciousness. Does our consciousness function like a spotlight, maybe, shining on one spot for a length of time? Is that how we pay attention? Is that how we focus? Is that how we attempt to be mindful? We don't know. Is consciousness something created by our brains? Or does consciousness exist all through the universe? It's this special stuff, and we human beings each have a little sliver of it, but so do all the other objects in the universe. All these are good questions, and no one at the moment has definitive answers to them. When I say cat or dog, you most likely have a subjective mental image that occurs to you. Perhaps it's even a complex image of a particular pet that meant a great deal to you. That's an image. By contrast, when I say White House, chances are you think of a whole matrix of meanings that are all jumbled together. For Americans, there's likely no doubt that we'll think of White House with capital letters, a building in the nation's capital. But White House probably doesn't mean only a building in Washington, D.C. to many of us. Some of us have actually been there and visited. Some of us have studied the place in history, and the list goes on. That is what a symbol is. It calls up a matrix of ideas and associations in our consciousness. And well, okay, but is that how consciousness works then? Is it heaps together all of these and we think we're thinking? How does that work? The 20th century psychiatrist Carl Jung focused his thought on how our minds operate. He thought that we think in images and symbols. And he thought that we have two places where these abide, in our conscious minds and in our subconscious. For Jung, the conscious, the ego, is the enforcer of conventionality and ossified social rules, tradition. In contrast, the subconscious is accessed in dreams and meditation and in art and in states of mind that he called the active imagination. We cannot reach what Jung called individuation, becoming individuals, becoming a self-actualized individual until we integrate these two aspects of ourselves. Jung wrote, quote, "The creative aspect of the imagination frees us from our knowledge of the nothing but and raises us to the state of one who plays." And now by the nothing buts, he meant conventional thinking, the puppets on strings who believe in the status quo. Those who play are the people who have realized an assertion by the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. Quote, "Realize that your mental images and the voice in your head is not reality, but your subjective judgments." The fiction writer Philip K. Dick insisted that writers write in order to mess up the script that others are writing for them. And Jung and Marcus Aurelius would agree with that, I think. We become the images we imagine of ourselves, our environment, our social locations, our nations, and the natural world. We've got to stay awake to the images that are driving our thoughts if we want to avoid being puppets on strings. The Spanish philosopher George Santayana said, people become superstitious not because they have too much imagination, but because they are not aware that they have any. And Jung would agree. We are more creative than we know. We create or adopt our images of reality without even noticing that we are doing it. And that can cause some problems. The human imagination is an amazing thing. When I began to write poetry as a young person, my exploration of poetry focused on writers who focused on the boundaries of human consciousness. They were pushing on the envelope of what human consciousness was. The ability to consciously create and manipulate images is a way of exploring consciousness itself. And that's the point where art and religions meet. I'll read a little bit of a poem called Night Breeze by the contemporary French poet Claire Malraux to give you a little idea of how this can be done. Unexpectedly, the windows open wide during the night. The rectangle swallows the bedroom. It's a different night where life turns inside out like a glove. A veined hand emerges, leaf of a negative hope on the phantom wall. Pointing towards what? The cliff of a lake, sea snows, lunar suns, a rough but tender tongue darts from it, paying no attention to the guardrails of speech. Come unstuck. Drawings, framed mirrors, the scribblings of the world slip from the walls, docile and unafraid. The sheets knot themselves for an escape, exchange close body heat for the sweet, cold freedom of clouds. Images manipulated to create an altered sense of consciousness. Claire Malraux is the great tradition, continues that of the symboliste poets back in the 19th century, Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Mallarmé, and then the French surrealists of the 20th century. We have the ability to escape the bounds of the images that are fed to us. We only have to realize that in order to break those chains. That's one of the reasons I think it's good to study some humanities. Each of us builds what in German is called a Weltbilder, a worldview or world pictures that add up these images to some kind of a symbol of reality. We heap those images together until we have created our realities. Generally speaking, we do not become conscious of this constructed reality until something causes us to stop and consider how this happens. It might be a jolt of serious illness or serious loss, or maybe it just develops out of a curious mind. But whatever the cause, it is this pause to consider where the pictures, the images come from that shows us through religions and through philosophies and through art that what we usually consider as solid reality is in fact a shoddy and malleable construction. Our day-to-day consciousness of reality is always a fixer-upper. A religion or a philosophy or an aesthetic in terms of the arts is nothing more and nothing less than a heap of images and symbols that present an orientation toward living a life, a Weltbilder, a worldview, a way of seeing the world and dealing with the pleasures and the pains and the challenges the world offers during our lifetimes. But what about when we have images of pestilent cell towers and lizard people overlords and pedophilic cannibals running pizza restaurants? No, this is not about education. That's a common liberal mistake. This is about the mind chasing shiny objects and reinforcing our preconceptions of how we already thought reality was going, a dangerous place and unknown. The 20th century French philosopher Pierre Hadot developed a neo-Stoic philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. And number one on his list of ways to change our lives through Stoicism is one that I quoted a little bit earlier. Realize that your mental images and the voice in your head is not reality, but your subjective judgments. And that's the essence of ancient Stoicism. It's the essence of Taoism and Buddhism and some traditions within Hinduism. Until we understand this foundational aspect of human consciousness, we are puppets on strings. Pierre Hadot goes on with the Stoicism-inspired list like this. Stop being a puppet on a string. Get into the moment. Assess where you are right now. What can you change? And what can't you change? Remember how short your time on this earth is. That's the list. The first step towards ceasing to be a puppet on a string is realizing that your mental images and the voice in your head is not reality, but only your subjective judgments. The way to stop being a puppet on a string is to realize that the images in our heads are creating our reality for us. If we let them, they will create our reality. The people who accept the fantasy that 5G networks spread coronavirus are puppets on strings. Images and ideas have been put in their heads by others, and those believers dance on that string, even to the point of destroying property and killing people. Those Confederate monuments are images created to pull at the heartstrings for that lost cause of the Civil War, leaving out that other image of the lost cause, the one about racialized slavery. As I said earlier, philosopher George Santayana understood people become superstitious not because they have too much imagination, but because they are not aware that they have any. The believers in conspiracy theories just can't see that they've been fed juicy images designed to create their subservience to fantasy. Killer cell towers, lizard people, pedophilic cannibals operating out of pizza restaurants. These are compelling images. They're shiny objects, and they have millions of people on strings. We progressives aren't immune. Ask yourself, who's pulling your strings? What's the image or the symbol that has you in its thrall? It's not only right-wing conspiracy theorists who are believing in the images that are implanted in our brains. Human beings are prone toward collective fantasies and then individual delusions. Here's an example. The American philosopher Frederick Jameson once said, quote, "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism," end quote. And I think he's right about that. So why is it easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism? Is it that the juicy images of apocalypse are easier for us to conjure up? Forests burning, glaciers melting, soil parched, children starving, grim and visceral images. We already know what the end of the world will look like when it does come, and those images are terrifying. But the end of capitalism, what would that look like? The first step towards ceasing to be a puppet on a string is realizing that your mental images and the voice in your head is not reality, but only your subjective judgments. Cutting those strings is about realizing the power of images and undermining that power when it's needed, rearranging those images and symbols, questioning. Sure, those who play with images and symbols are going to make mistakes and chase shiny objects around. Yeah, we do. But we must be vigilant and awake and aware and always working toward human flourishing rather than living in fear. I'll end with a translation of chapter 12 from the Tao Te Ching, translated by Ursula K. Le Guin. And it's all about images, this little chapter. It's called Not Wanting. The 5 colors blind our eyes. The 5 notes deafen our ears. The 5 colors dull our taste. Racing, chasing, hunting drives people crazy. Trying to get rich ties people in knots. So, the wise soul watches with the inner, not the outward eye, letting that go, keeping this. So may it be. Me from home and our extinguishing the chalice words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All of these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again.
Who doesn't love Pixar films? They're some of the most imaginative films ever created. I'd like you to take out your pencils now or keep it in your mind, but I'm going to play a Pixar medley. Let's see how many of these you guess. Okay, so how did you all do? Here's what we had. See how many you got right. Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., Up, Ratatouille, Finding Nemo, and the last, probably my favorite, Inside Out. Have a wonderful week.
Well, thanks so much, Barb, for getting our imaginations working a little bit there. Yeah, we got some participatory stuff going on there. And thank you all for being the kind of people who will question reality and look at the deeper meanings rather than just swallowing our media and all of our news whole. And thanks for joining us today in this virtual gathering of our congregation. May this new year be filled with images of hope for you. The Unitarian Transcendentalist minister Theodore Parker wrote, "Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. So may it be." Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.